Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Castro.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. And Mr. Wolf, during your time in the Trump administration at DHS, you oversaw the design and implementation of the monstrous and cruel family separation policy, tearing children away from their families, many of whom are yet to be reunited with their parents. Here are a few examples of those kids that you ripped from their families. You've suppressed a DHS report about the dangers of white supremacy. Your tenure at DHS was marred with significant ethical and legal concerns. Your communications during January 6th mysteriously disappeared. And there are serious ethical questions about your relationship with a lobbying firm. You explicitly defied congressional subpoenas to testify in front of the then Democratic Congress, yet you've shown up today voluntarily, yet feel comfortable testifying here today. Federal courts even ruled that your tenure as quote-unquote acting secretary of DHS was illegal. In your testimony, you've described many of President Biden's efforts as quote-unquote illegal. But I find it ironic that we should trust you on what is lawful given your extensive disregard for American law. So let's discuss one of those egregious policies you implemented that was eventually struck down by American courts. Mr. Wolf, you were one of the key architects of the Trump administration's efforts to separate families at the border. Children as young as 4 months were mercilessly taken from their parents, with almost 1,000 children still not reunited with their families years later, even though the Biden administration set up a task force to reunite them. I'm a father of 3 kids, a 9-year-old daughter, a 7-year-old son, and an 18-month-old daughter. Do you have kids, Mr. Wolf?
I do.
What you did is unimaginable, unimaginable, inhumane, and despicable. And quite frankly, I'm surprised the chairman invited you to be here today. Yet earlier this week, when you were asked about revisiting family separations, you said that, quote, all options need to be on the table. As we all know, we're having an important debate about immigration in the Congress and for the presidency. So I'd like to ask you an important question. I'd like a yes or no answer. I'd like you to be a straight shooter. You are from Texas, after all. Would you advise this or a future administration to once again separate families as the Trump administration did?
So I will stand by my statement that you, I think, quoted earlier, that all options should be on the table. But what I would say is that there are a number of effective programs, including MPP and others that I'm sure we'll talk about, that address the situation along that border. And the crisis that we faced in 18 is very different than the crisis that we face today.
So that means that you do think that it should be considered and possibly used.
That's not my response.
For the record here, I'll remind you, Mr. Wolf, that what you did is inhumane. And I'll be requesting that the Biden administration release all documents related to family separation policy, and we'll settle the matter once and for all on your involvement in that policy. I also want to ask you another important question. It's often the case that folks who give testimony before Congress, folks who served in one administration, if there is a second administration, they will often serve again. That's true for Democrats and Republicans. There's a chance that if President Trump is elected to office, that you might be considered to serve in the administration again, regardless of what my opinion or the opinion of others here may be of you. So, Mr. Wolf, do you or your organization support the use of military force in Mexico, even without the consent of the Mexican government, as many leading Republican officials have called for?
I've been on record as supporting all hands or all options should be on the table when we look at the threat of cartels and the violence against Americans.
So you might counsel a yes?
I think all options should be considered. This idea of taking options off the table for a variety of different policy issues that we have addressed, it makes no sense. And I should say all the other things that you leveled against me were all just absurd on their face.
Listen, your America First Policy Institute is closely related with President Trump. So I just have one final question for you and your colleague, if you wish to answer it. What happens to the America First Policy Institute if President Trump goes to prison?
The America First Policy Institute will continue to be around for hundreds of years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mike McCall, and we appreciate